Hey, what you say, food family? Mike here, and welcome back to the channel for another great culinary adventure. On today's food vacation, we're going to head south of the border where the taco reigns supreme. We're going to be making tacos 3 different ways. We're going to do some slow cooker barbacoa, pressure cooker birria, and finish things up with some oven roasted al pastor. It's a feast in itself for Cinco de Mayo, but individually on their own, they'll make your next Taco Tuesday the talk of the town. And we're going to be doing it all from scratch. So if you love tacos on up your Fiesta game, stick around and this gringo will show you how it's done. Vamos a cocinar. Let's get cooking. For our slow cooker barbacoa, we're going to be using a chuck roast today. But first we need to make a rub for that so we get all those great flavors in there. And I have everything lined up in front of me. If you need to know the exact amounts, you can check the link in the description below. But otherwise, let's get started. I'm going to be using a whole bunch of cilantro here, stems and all. There's a lot of great flavor. No need to cut those off. I'm going to be blending this, by the way. I'm just going to use a smaller container. So we got our cilantro, some garlic, lime juice, Mexican oregano, chili powder. I'm using hot Calabrian chili powder. You can use whatever you like. Chipotles and adobo, of course. Some cumin, cumino, garlic salt. And I'm gonna finish up with 3 tablespoons here of tomato paste. Close enough. All right, I'm gonna throw this in the blender, get this all mixed up and turn into like a thick paste, and then we'll get back and we'll start searing off our chuck roast. And the next thing we need to do for our slow cooker barbacoa is sear off our chuck roast. I'm just gonna season mine simple today with some salt and pepper. Other than that, we're just gonna sear both sides and then we'll get it in the slow cooker and get it rubbed with that paste. As you just saw, we seared off our chuck roast on all sides. Now what we're going to do is cover with that paste, get it in our slow cooker, fill it up with some beef stock and some beer. And since we are talking cerveza here, we got to give it a taste test like always. So let's see how it's going to be. Yep, that'll do the trick. So let me swap to the other camera. And we'll get this inside the slow cooker and get it cooking on low for 10 hours. All right, we'll start with our seared chuck roast. Just have that laid in there. Then we'll take half of our paste we made up. And just spread that across. This side doesn't matter as much because it's going to get flipped over and put on the bottom. What I'm going to do is flip it over. And take the rest of our paste, coat this side. Now I like to put a little extra on this side because this will actually cook down into the meat once it starts to soften up later on after 6 or 7 hours. Alright, that looks good. Now when we pour beef broth, we're going to go here on the edges. We don't want to knock that paste off. And same for our beer. And you don't have to use beer, you can just use more beef stock or broth, whatever you want. And you don't have to worry about this being completely covered. It actually shouldn't be. And then we'll finish off with just a couple bay leaves there on top. All right, as you see behind me, we got the barbacoa going in the slow cooker that's on low for 10 hours. So in the meantime, the next thing we want to do is make our marinade for the al pastor. And I've already got the ingredients lined up out here. And I've already rehydrated the chilies in some hot water. You can get dried chilies already if you want, but today we're using pasilla, guajillo, and chilies de arbol. Other than that, we'll make our marinade here, and then we'll get to slicing the pork. So start with our peppers that are rehydrated. Add our onion. Like I said, I just went ahead and rough chopped it so everything fits in here a little better. It's still going to be kind of a tight fit. Probably should use the big blender. Cinnamon, cumin, Mexican oregano, and that has more of a lemon fragrance to it than regular oregano, so it is quite a difference. A little salt, garlic cloves. Try to make some room here. White vinegar. Achiote paste, that will turn everything red, so be careful when you handle it. And our pineapple juice. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on this, get it blended up, and we'll come back and slice the pork. So our marinade has been blended. As you can see here, we got a full container. It's toxic red. It will dye everything within a million miles. So I got my gloves on, but for right now I'm going to set this out of the way, and we're going to turn our attention to the pork. Now, since we're only marinating this 6 to 8 hours while the barbacoa cooks, I'm going to slice it as thin as possible, 1/8 to 1/4 inch slices, so that marinade has time to penetrate into the meat. So let's get this pork sliced and marinated. As you just saw, slice that pork as thin as possible. It's a little bit easier if you freeze it, put it in the freezer for about an hour or so ahead of time, but we're just getting it done today. It worked out. Sharp knife helps. So I'm going to put a little bit of the pork in at a time and then mix it with the marinade just so it's a little easier. Make sure everything's well coated, and definitely make sure you're wearing gloves unless you want to have red hands for the next week. All right, that looks pretty good for this marinade for the al pastor. We're going to put a lid on it. We'll throw it in the fridge for the next 6-7 hours. And in the meantime, that barbacoa behind me is going to keep doing its thing in that slow cooker. And welcome back. Our pork has been marinating for about 7 hours now. I did pull it out of the fridge about 30-45 minutes ago just so it can start to warm up to kind of speed up that cooking process time. But other than that, it is time to layer our marinated al pastor on this vertical skewer pan. Now, if you don't have a vertical skewer pan, that's totally fine. You can just slice the bottom of your pineapple, put a dowel rod or wooden skewer in that, and then layer it up just the same. But if you got the fancy pan, use the fancy pan. So, other than that, nothing else to do. I'm going to move this out of the way just for a second here. We're going to slice the bottom of this coconut off. Alright, so as you can see, I just popped that very bottom core out just so this will slide down easier than trying to force it. Move this out of the way for a minute. And we're going to start to layer our pork on that as best you can. It's kind of a process, but let me get started here. And every piece is going to be cut a little weird, so you just kind of rotate it back and forth. Try to make the basic similar shape all the way around. Alright, I think you get the base principle. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll put a layer of pineapple on the top to finish it off. So give me a few minutes and we'll get right back with you. Alright, took a few minutes, but we got the pork layered up there. Now, you could tell there were some pieces that weren't going to fit on there real nice, so I just kind of tucked them in there and then used a bigger piece on top. We had a few extra pieces there at the end that we're going to fill in the skewer, so I just Put them around the bottom so they can get cooked. They'll come out tasting just the same. The only thing left to do is to top this thing off with another slice of pineapple. So let me slide this up here. Now we don't need the very top of our pineapple, so we'll just take this part off. Save that for a fancy decor or something later. And then we'll take another ring about an inch or so thick and finish things off right on top. Now those juices will base down through it as it bakes. Now speaking of baking, we're going to roast this in the oven. We're going to have it at 250 degrees. It should take, 3.5, maybe 4 hours tops, just depending on how long. You could also put this out in your smoker as well. For today, I'm just going to oven roast it and make things easy. So I'm going to get the oven preheated, get this thing in there, and we'll get back with the next steps. Now in that last segment, we obviously used the bottom and top of this pineapple, but we're not going to waste this middle section either. We're going to slice this up, take off the outsides, and this will actually be used for serving with the al pastor tacos. You can put a couple pieces of pineapple on your taco itself. So I'm going to go ahead and slice this up. We'll put it in the bowl, put it in the fridge for now until that stuff's done and ready for later. And moving right along, we can get started on our pressure cooker birria tacos. We're going to be working with some dried chilies today. I got some chilies de árbol, pasilla, ancho, and guajillo chilies. They've all been de-seeded and stemmed. I've cut them down somewhat in size just so they'll be easier later on in the using the immersion blender. But to start out, we're going to put our pressure cooker on saute mode, no oil or anything, just dry. Get that up to hot, drop our chilies in, and toast them for about 4 or 5 minutes until they're aromatic. We'll pull them out, and then we'll move on to searing our beef for our birria tacos. So let's get these things toasted. Okay, as you saw there, I got the chilies toasted for about 5 or 6 minutes. Started to smell amazing in here. Pulled them out, and I went ahead and dumped the extra seeds, whatever that was left over. Now all I'm going to do is put a little bit of oil in the bottom of our Instant Pot, still on that hot saute mode. I seasoned one side of the chuck roast with salt and pepper. We're going to sear it on both sides. We'll season the other side once we put this side down. Other than that, we will get this meat seared, and then we'll move on with the next couple steps. Alright, if you can see me through the little bit of smoke there, we seared both sides of the meat, about 5 minutes per side. Did 2 batches there just so I wasn't overcrowding the Instant Pot. It's still got it saute mode on hot, so I'm going to go ahead and toss in some sliced onions and let these go for about 2 minutes. We'll just stir those around. Now once these cook 2 minutes, we'll go ahead and add our remaining ingredients. We're going to have some Mexican oregano, cumin, cinnamon, coriander, bay leaves, garlic, tomato paste. You know, your standard affair. It'll be linked in the description below, the exact recipe and the amount of stuff you need. Other than that, we'll let this saute, and then we'll be deglazing, putting our meat back in, and letting it cook. Okay, as you saw there, we got all the extra herbs and flavors and everything else added. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, another cup of beef stock, and then those chilies we toasted earlier. I'm just going to make sure they're completely soaked down in the liquids. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and add our beef back. And just make it all fit this time. Right on top of that, so all those chilies and everything stay on the bottom, and that'll prevent the meat from actually burning. And of course, any juices that came out. Okay, now that all our meat is back in the pot, the dried chilies are submerged, we're going to put the lid on, put the vent to sealing position, and we're going to cook it for 40 minutes. And when that 40 minutes is up, we're going to let it naturally pressure release, which should take about 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead, seal this up, put the lid on, and we'll see you in about a little over an hour. Okay, so I just removed our chuck roast, the beef barbacoa that's been cooking for 10 hours on low in the slow cooker. I just removed that from the slow cooker and I got it in this separate container. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shred this apart. We'll take maybe a half a cup to a cup of our juice that's left from the cooking process, add that to it to keep everything nice and moist, and then we can go on to making a taco when everything else is ready. So stand by just a second and I'll get this shredded and we'll give it a quick taste test before we do the full taco test. As you saw in the previous clip, that beef just shredded itself. I mean, I barely touched it with those tongs and that fork and it just came apart. So which means it's going to be moist and juicy and tender. What can I say? That's a great thing about slow cooking a big hunk of meat. Other than that, I did use about a half a cup of our leftover cooking liquids just to keep everything moist and juicy and fortify the flavors. The only thing left we got to do is do a quick taste test before we make our final tacos later on. That is going to make for an amazing taco. It's got a little smoky heat to it from those chipotles and adobo sauce. So I'm really looking forward to making our final taco later on. Right now I'm going to put this away. We'll finish up our other 2 batches we got going. And we'll make our final taste test. Alright, we pulled the lid off our Instant Pot Pressure Cooker. The birria has finished cooking. We'll pull the meat out, just the meat alone, and put that in a separate container. We're going to shred it, and then we'll get the immersion blender out and get all the sauce and the chilies and everything ground up and make a nice consomme sauce. So stand by just a minute. We'll get this stuff separated and shredded and move on to the next step. Alright, and before I forget, you also want to make sure you pull out those 2 bay leaves we put in there earlier. No one wants to eat that. But anyway, I got the meat out. We'll pull out the immersion blender, get this mixed up, and we'll shred the beef, and then we'll come back for a taste test. Now, as you just saw, we got our beef shredded just like the barbacoa. It's shredded on its own, basically, just fine. Now, unlike the barbacoa, though, birria is meant to be a little more saucy. So we took 5 or 6 ladles of that consomme we had from the leftover cooking liquids that we pureed and added that to it. Now, we're not getting rid of the other stuff either, though, because we're going to actually dip our tortillas in that before we fry them up to make this taco. But in the meantime, let's give this a quick taste and see how it turned out. Super hot, of course. Moist, tender meat, pulls apart in your mouth, just amazing. A little different flavor profile than our barbacoa, though. Our barbacoa is that smoky adobo flavor. This you got a little more chili. I'm not even sure how to describe it, but we'll get to that when I make the actual taco. In the meantime, let me get this put away, everything put up and cleaned up, and then we'll pull the al pastor out of the oven and see how it turned out. Welcome back, folks. We finally have finished up our feast today, our Cinco de Mayo feast, or Ultimate Taco Tuesday, whatever you're here for. Our al pastor has finished roasting. I pulled it out of the oven, let it cool for a little bit, and there's only one thing left to do, and that's give it a taste test. Now, obviously, we're meant to carve a little slice off here and make it all pretty, but I'll wait on that for a little close-up view. But in the meantime, let's just take a little bite, one of these little bottom pieces, so we can have that taste test. That's it. Waving the white flag, throw it in the towel. Okay, not really, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to top this. Between the barbacoa, that birria, and this al pastor, I think I might have just pulled off a miracle. The whitest guy ever to make all this amazing food from scratch using a slow cooker, a pressure cooker, and the oven. Or if you want to do it in the smoker, you can do it in the smoker. It is just too good. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with making tacos of each of these different meats because maybe you're not here for a taco. Maybe you want to make a burrito. Maybe you just want to eat it plain with no tortilla or nothing. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. So instead, I'm just going to film it, eat it, enjoy it, because if you know, you know, and if you don't, click that link below and go to the website and check out the recipe and make it for yourself, because it's not that hard. Do you think I knew what I was doing before I tried this today? Hell no. I took some dried Mexican chilies, I rehydrated them, I made al pastor marinade, we made birria, we made barbacoa. If I can do it, this gringo, you can do it. That being said, Mike here signing off, and until next time, just keep cooking.